Fauji is here. We must revert to the.
No, no, no. Good evening and welcome to Gana Shot. Today is a special episode, and this is dedicated to two special friends, one senior and one junior, right? And I'll explain as I go along. But we're going to talk about a life under fire in Kashmir. We'll talk about the surgical strikes, and we'll talk of not one, but we'll talk of two generals reminiscing, right? And with this, let me welcome both the generals. Uh, Sir, good evening to General HASNAIN and hi to Satish. It's a great honor that we are here. At the outset, before we go into the whole story, I'd like to congratulate General Satish Dua for the excellent book he's written. And it's a really, a touching book. It's also a book which encompasses events over a large swathe of time, virtually his lifetime in the army, from the time he got commissioned to the time he got retired, and probably after that. It's a book which reflects the passage of time in Kashmir. It's if you look at it from one point of view, it's memories down the memory lane. But if you look at it from the other point of view, it reflects the tribulations, the joys and the pains, and the guts and the valor of the Indian Army, which has seen Kashmir over these years. Uh, I have two co-commanders of the Chinar Corps with me, who commanded 15 Corps. 15 Corps, for those of you who don't know, is the heart of, in the Srinagar Valley, Badami Bagh, and it controls. It's one of the most important corps of the Indian Army, and we're going to get two perspectives. We're not going to go beyond the book. And let me tell you, time is of no consequence to me today because I need to get this catharsis out. We need to. We need both these gentlemen to speak their hearts out, and because Kashmir itself is in a point where some tomorrow is going to start once the elections. It's a new chapter in Kashmir itself. So we're going to cover a whole range. Uh, I'll request General Atta Hasnain sir. Sir, I want you to give 2 minutes and then we give the lead to Satish to explain what his book is all about.
Well, the first thing I need to do, of course, saying good evening and Jai Hind to all our viewers. I'm thanking Satish and thanking you, John Shankar, for inviting me to this show. First thing I need to do is to show the book to you. Here it is, right here. Okay, it's flagged to also show that I have read it. I have read it cover to cover, absolutely, and made a lot of notes in it. It took me 2.5 to 3 hours of focused reading, absolutely. It can take longer because one is very, very familiar with the event, so that's why you can go much faster with it. Learned a lot of lessons from it. Took a lot of thoughts and ideas, came back. Lots and lots of reminders came back. I would like to sort of initiate this entire discussion of ours by saying that it is books like these, it is authors like General Dua who are doing justice to one very important thing. And that is to tell the country, tell our countrymen what their army has done in Jammu and Kashmir. Not many armies in the world have achieved what your army has achieved. You can see what is happening in Gaza and you can see what is happening in Lebanon at the moment. This is a gentleman army which has fought just with all the rules, with his hands tied behind his back at many times, right? Following every single aspect of humanity, the humanitarian aspects, balancing out our doctrines in every way. Whenever we possibly were trying to go a little overboard, we always pulled ourselves back. And that is something which not many armies around the world have achieved. The more we speak about it, the less it is. And that is why in today's, this session, from my side, is dedicated to the Indian Army, to the unknown soldier, to the unknown officers and men. Lots and lots of people who are unsung, which Dua will talk about, I'm sure. People like the Ikhwans and people like the territorial army personnel, everyone's effort has gone into bringing what Kashmir has come to today. I hope on the 8th of October we will hear something good, which will lead us to a stable, politicized, the political environment getting stable and looking forward to a great future. All this has been enabled by
Yeah.
the sacrifices of our soldiers. Over to you, Chandra.
Thanks a lot, sir. That was a great introduction, very motivating. I'd like Satish to give out, what is there in this book that you've written, and and add to that. I'd like what motivated you to write this, because it's not a usual book, and I'll get back to that a little later. What motivated you to write, and just give us an idea of what you covered in this book.
Jai Hind, everybody, and thank you, General Shankar, for this, holding this discussion, and thank you, General HASNAIN, sir, for a very, very warm introduction, and I'm sure we'll all enjoy our discussion now. I'll take second part of your question first, Shankar, sir. That is what made me, or what sort of inspired me to write this book. When I was the corps commander in Srinagar, I was also the colonel of Jackal Regiment. Let me tell the viewers, I am from Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry Regiment. So all my life, all my professional life, and beyond, I have served with soldiers who belong to Jammu and Kashmir. In fact, my regiment's composition is 50% Muslims, 40% Dogras, and 10% Sikhs. And now we have a smattering of Ladakhis. So this has been my Karam Bhumi. Anytime I go into any village, even now, after retirement, I've made 4 or 5 trips. If I go into a village now, I find many retired Jackalai soldiers. So I can always, known faces are there, or someone, I can feel the pulse easily. When I was now getting back to the point as to what inspired me to write the book, when I was a corps commander and also colonel of Jackalai Regiment, and I visited the Territorial Army Battalion, home and hearth, and we'll talk about this later. But I realized that is a very, although theoretically I knew it, we all knew it. But when you actually get into it with the boys, then you realize the import of it. Not only that, whenever I visited after any good operation, it is very customary that a leader would go to give a pat to the boys. It may be next day, it may be after 2 days, but then it would happen. And I'm sure General HASNAIN has done that, General Shankar has done that in their own times. So whenever I went there, I would find they would introduce me, the company commander there, the commanding officer there, would introduce me very proudly to 2, 3 or 4 boys. They are from the Territorial Army Battalion of my regiment. And so they are the ones who did a very great job. They generated some intelligence because they are sons of the soil. And we'll talk about this later. So somewhere that time, it dawned on me that this is a story that needs to be told. Then HASNAIN also referred to Ikhwan. We will talk about the forerunner of this Territorial Army Battalion, the Ikhwan. Now, Ikhwan is something I'm sure many viewers are hearing of this for the first time. And all along in my service and life, whenever I've spoken about Ikhwan, people have not known about this. And there is one full chapter devoted to Ikhwan. Besides, they keep coming up in operations throughout the book. So I thought I will write this book at leisure. But as fate would have it, let me bring out a very interesting coincidence. I was commissioned, let me finish my sentence. As fate would have it, I was pushed to doing this earlier. I was commissioned in December 1979. My first posting was to Srinagar, to the Jackalai Regimental Center. That's what all infantry officers do. We first go to to our regimental centers. That was in January 80. A few months after I joined Jackali Regiment, Nazir Wani was born in Kulgam. So my service in Jackali and his birth is nearly, it was in the same year. 24 days after I retired on 31st of October 2018. Then on 24th November, there was this operation in Batagund in which Nazir Wani made the supreme sacrifice and he was awarded Ashok Chakra, the highest gallantry medal in India, and the first Kashmiri to be awarded Ashok Chakra. Incidentally, he was not an accidental braveheart. He had 2 Sena medals before that. So this coincidence, his entire life strangely coincided with my entire service in Jackali, and therefore I wrote these 2 narratives. One is my narrative, my first posting as a second lieutenant. Thereafter, my first posting as a captain in Kupwara. My battalion was deployed there. Then I was a major in Kargil. So on, and every rank I have served in Jammu and Kashmir. So my impressions of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, are there in every rank over here. As I grew senior, my interaction became at higher level. When I was a corps commander, I would interact with the senior officers of police and CRPF, also with the chief minister and governor, and you took part in all the. You were the security advisor to the chief minister, to the government of JNK. So, there once exposure grew, and so with my narrative, I have set the context, the social, political, uh, religious, security concept in all these aspects. I have set the context. And with Nazir as a protagonist, I have actually brought out with his story, I bring out how, what was a state response to terrorism, how it changed over the years, how we raised the Rashtriya Rifles, how how we pumped in more battalions, why we raised Ikhwan, the concept of Ikhwan, and we'll discuss that in detail. We will then, after how Ikhwan was instrumental in helping us conduct, us meaning the state, conduct the elections in 1996, which were a turning point in JNK politics, in JNK scenario, and how Ikhwan was wound up after nearly a decade. And then we formed a bold experiment. Ikhwan itself was a bold experiment. This was a bolder experiment. In fact, the name of my chapter is this: bold experiment and a bolder experiment. A bolder experiment, while you already have, like Ikhwan, there are contra rebel groups. We've had such cases in South America. We've had Jadwa Sulum here in Central India. But we have never had, I don't, arguably, this is unique in the world, that you form an army battalion of surrendered terrorists. So many rules had to be waived, and we'll talk about it when we come to it. But we made an army battalion, a new concept of territorial army, home and hearth. Home and hearth means they are sons of the soil. And now this concept has caught on. It is there. We are reaping the benefits of having this such battalions in operational areas. And how we actually got hold of insurgency, the terrorism, how we got control of it. This is the entire journey is with Nazir Wani as a protagonist. Then, of course, as an epilogue, I do add events that took place even after my retirement. Dilution of Article 370, the progress that, or the developments that took place in last 5 years, uh, just before the elections. Uh, and my book actually stops just before the elections. And in fact, in my last pages, I do write, despite this violence that is in south of Pir Panjal ranges that has been reactivated, the, we must hold elections. We must not let the separatists and the evil designs of Pakistan succeed while they are trying to activate these areas. And today, as we speak, we have just finished the elections in all the three phases of elections in J&K, peaceful and very participative. The percentages, the poll turnout is very heartening. So it's a journey of 4 decades. um, when we started, how it was, and we'll see the ups and downs. The book brings out the ups and downs in a tale, and these are two narratives that are intertwined. They intersect at many places, intertwined narratives, and uh, uh, I hope you all enjoy reading the book as much as I enjoyed writing it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So what we'll do now is, General Hasnain, sir, you read this book, right? We're just discussing about it. You've seen the major events which is covered. Uh, what I'd like is, and you had more experience than all of us in Kashmir. Uh, you also been the GOC there. So, uh, what I'd like you to do is put up 3 or 4 instances of your which we've felt where the turning points are, very important events in the history of Kashmir as we now see it, which Satish has not covered, right? And I would like thereafter Satish to cover those 3 or 4 instances which you have covered in this book, which you feel are most important. And for both, kindly don't talk of the surgical strikes because we'll cover that separately. Don't, and we'll end up discussing the elections because we have to look forward. So this is the way I think we should go forward. So, and I mean, we can always deviate and all that. So with this, General Hasnain, sir, before I start, I'd like all viewers, put in your thoughts, put in your message to General Satish Dua to at least congratulate him. I'll request you, this is a special thing. And I'll keep flashing it as we go along. With this, General Hasnain, sir, all yours.
Thank you, General Shankar, and compliments once again, General Satish Dua. The problem is that you will have to stop me somewhere or the other because,
No, don't worry, sir.
one
Like I
just
said,
carries on. With Kashmir, one can
no,
just carry
don't
on.
worry. No, time is no constraint today to me.
Okay.
Just carry on.
What I'll do is, let me start by complimenting General Dua once again. This book is immensely readable. Let me tell everyone who is watching, it's immensely readable. It's a connection of a number of events put together. He has not labored on any of these events. He has labored to an extent, maybe a lot on the Ikhwan, which is something which has not been covered by most people who have written anything on Kashmir. Because most people have never come near the Ikhwan. Fortunately, both him and I have seen the Ikhwan operations extensively. So I'll speak about that. But before that, I want to draw out something which comes out from this book very starkly. There is a misnomer in our nation that the entire Muslim community of Jammu and Kashmir was fighting against the Indian army sponsored by Pakistan. Take that out of your minds completely. It was a Pakistani concept to ensure that they brought in a narrative of faith and religion into Jammu and Kashmir. That is the only way they felt that they could draw the Muslim majority elements towards Pakistan, help them to be a larger part of the Ummah, etc. They targeted the Kashmiri Pandit community to try and evict them from here, create a virtual genocide-like conditions, so that you create an even greater Muslim majority. But you cannot forget one thing. Any element may have been affected by this. The bureaucracy may have got affected by it. A lot of other elements may have got affected. 2 elements never got affected. One is the Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry, which continued to do its duties exactly as it was required to. Not one soldier looked left or right. You have to marvel at the fact that hundreds and thousands of these young soldiers came home on leave, 2 months, twice, thrice in a year they came on casual leave and remained there under those conditions when the entire countryside was burning. This much you have to give to the Jammu and Kashmir light infantry soldier. Why the Muslim only? The Hindu soldier, the Dogra soldier, the Sikh soldier, they were all a part of this entire thing. You have also got to understand and recognize that the Jammu and Kashmir police, the JKP, is 70% Muslim. Even they did not wilt. Their officer cadre did not wilt. And it's the joint effort of these two elements, the Jammu and Kashmir police, specially led by the Special Operations Group in subsequent years, and the Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry, which added tremendous weight to our efforts. Of course, the coming of the Rashtra Rifles was the feather in the cap of the Indian Army, the greatest military experiment I think the Indian Army has ever done. I say it is the greatest military experiment any army which has fought counterinsurgency has ever carried out. Originally, it started as an idea of bringing in ex-servicemen to fight insurgents or terrorists. And it was hoped that we create these battalions and they will be able to fight, not realizing the vicious levels to which this terrorism had reached. And very well described in this book, the origins of the Rashtra Rifles. Although I still endorse that it was General B.C. Joshi, the man who actually, the General B.C. Joshi, the former chief, who actually as the DG military operations, the DGMO, was the man behind the whole show. It was his Deputy Director General Brigadier Dhillon, later on General Dhillon, one of the iconic corps commanders, one of our predecessors here in 1995 to 1997. He is the man who ensured that the Rashtra Rifles became a 6-company unit. He fought with the MOD and ensured 6 months of delay, but ultimately we have a 6-company concept, which is why I still remember walking up to the former army chief, the previous army chief, General Manoj Pandey, and telling him, virtually begging him that now that there is normalcy coming in Jammu and Kashmir, don't reduce the size of the Rashtra Rifle unit. Our predecessors, our forefathers fought to make it a 6-company battalion. I learned that you are trying to convert it to a 4-company unit again. Please don't do it. Because this whole cycle is going to come back again, just exactly as it is happening in Jammu at the moment.
So can I make a point here? I mean,
Yeah.
if it's okay. Let's
please,
discuss.
please.
Let's discuss. So that I don't have to get back to it again. So you're right about whatever you say. In fact, I have had in the last few days, a few officers, especially officers senior to me, have messaged me, and I've clarified this. You are absolutely right about what you said, how it started, the 6 companies, and General Joshi gave it the push. However, the original idea, as you also know,
Came from General Sundarji's time.
was General Sundarji, and in fact, Arun Singh actually helped him because of his close
Yes.
proximity with
I'm aware.
Rajiv.
I'm aware.
And yes, you are aware. It was originally started for Punjab. So I just wanted to bring
Absolutely.
that out. And
Absolutely.
first 6 battalions were raised in 1990. They were with 2 sector headquarters, and they were sent. General Mankotia was the first DG. And
I remember 3R was a unit of my regiment originally, and then became part of the Jackrif. Subsequently,
Yes.
it was raised for Punjab, and immediately in 1990, as things started going berserk after the
Yes.
Kashmiri Pandit killings, the entire Rashtra Rifle shifted to the valley, and ultimately 8th Sector RR came from
Yes.
northeast and joined the 15 Corps also at a later stage in 1999 when I was the Colonel GSO Victor Force. So this is very much true. There's nothing wrong in it. What I
Yes.
wanted to emphasize is the role of someone like General Joshi was
Absolutely. He's the one who expanded it so much. Otherwise, we were just 6 battalions. Now we are 63. So
and General Dhillon's thing I wanted to put on record, because General Dhillon was one of the remarkable corps commanders, the corps commander during Cherar-e-Sharif, during Hazrat Bal, and all those incidents which took place. Not Hazrat Bal. Hazrat Bal, it was not him, but
that was
Cherar-e-Sharif.
General Paddy.
Yeah,
Hazrat, that was
General
General
Paddy.
Paddy. I was there as a major then.
Yes, absolutely. So I thought this aspect of the Rashtra Rifles is very important. It has fought right through. It has taken away the complete pressure from the infantry, the rest of the infantry.
Yes.
And in Jammu and Kashmir, let me assure everyone, there is nothing as the infantry or Rashtra Rifles or something like that. Everyone is a frontline soldier. General Shankar is here, and he would vouch for the fact that 8th Artillery Brigade played its frontline role in the Gulmarg sector right through. I had 3 of my units of the 1990 Brigade, which were right on the line of control, deployed on the line of control in a counter-infiltration role. So no one can ever claim that I was the only one who did this kind of a thing. Everyone played his part. Having said that, the second thing which I would just like to highlight is the fact that the elections of 1996, we'll discuss elections later, of course, but elections of 1996, the year 96, 97 was a very important year.
Yes.
Within 7 years, we took the decision to go to bring about the elections. Not many countries in the world will experiment with a democratic kind of a process within 7 years of an insurgency as serious as this, or terrorism as serious as this. There was a reason in 1996 why we did it. And I want people to understand this. We were under tremendous pressure of Pakistan. Pakistan had taken us to the cleaners at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. And we were under pressure of this lady called, the very famous, you remember her, the Undersecretary or the Assistant Secretary for State for the United States for South Asia, called Robin Raphael. Robin Raphael was the wife of Ambassador Raphael, who died with Zia in the famous crash at Bahawalpur. She had an axe to grind with India, and she is the one who initiated the formation of the Hurriyat. The all-party Hurriyat conference was originally financed by Robin Raphael. And it's under this pressure that we passed the resolution of 22nd of February 1994. Why all this I'm saying is because in 1996, finally, a decision was taken, irrespective of turnout, let there be 2% turnout, 3% turnout, we will go for elections to create the idea of a self-rule and project it to the world. India is still allowing the Kashmiri to rule himself. It was one of the most iconic decisions by the government of India at that particular time. I wish we had removed Article 370 in 1994 when
Yes.
the 22nd February resolution was passed. We had political consensus across the board. And if we had done it, we would have been 30 years down today. Yeah, go ahead.
That's a very interesting point you made. I also want to give another very interesting fact for the viewers. Although I'm not brought this out in the book, because I mean my narrative was slightly different. In 1994, if I have my figures right, if I have my years right, 1994, India had to go and explain itself in the UN for human rights commissions for the allegations that were laid by Pakistan. And when we had to explain, Narasimha Rao was the prime minister, and guess who he sent? Of course, you all know. I'm just talking to the viewers. Guess who was sent to argue India's case? It was the leader of opposition, Mr. Vajpayee. And accompanying him was Farooq Abdullah. Also, of course, was Salman Khurshid as the external affairs minister. But then you see that was such a good thing to have happened. Now also in the end we'll discuss elections. But what is happening is that their personal differences were kept aside, and everyone put India first. So that is a good kind of a thing that has happened.
Political consensus is always a game changer, which is what led to this particular thing.
I think
now, sir,
I must highlight one minute, Satish, 1 minute. I think both of you made a terrific point, which I want to highlight. political consensus was a game changer across the divide. Here we had a case where a prime minister sent the leader of the opposition to go and fight India's case there. And he went, right? And with the gentleman who's still around, Farooq Abdullah, who fought for this case, all that. Just think today, are we doing that? Are we capable of doing that? And if I put it in context, I mean, I'm being very honest, absolutely honest about it. I doubt if today's political firmament, whether they're in the opposition or in the ruling party or in some third corner of this thing, will even talk in these terms. And this is the greatest impediment today to what's going to come further in Kashmir. Yeah,
we
please.
we will discuss this issue when in the end when we talk about elections, because
Yeah,
perhaps
fine.
we might end up with a very hung
Absolutely.
assembly, and we might have to resort to some craftsmanship or statesmanship like this.
Yeah, I will
I will
see.
just pick up. I will just
Yeah,
pick
we'll
up
see
from
that. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
and left, and talk a bit about Ikhwan.
Okay, let me talk about
Ikhwan,
Ikhwan. Since your last
I-
word was the Ikhwan, let me speak one small instance about Ikhwan.
okay.
You see, I've had the experience of one other counter group like this in Sri Lanka called the EPRLF. If you
Yes.
remember, the EPRLF against the LTT. And many members of the EPRLF came with us back to Chennai also, let me tell you. Lots of them came back to Chennai. So we had handled them in Sri Lanka during our war. When I landed up here in Avantipur as the current years of Victor Force, Ikhwan was at his height at that time. Kokapare in the north, Liaquat Ali, Hilal Haider
Yeah.
down in Janglat Mandi in Anantnag at that particular time. I want to particularly draw the attention of our viewers to one particular instance where the Indian army was not perhaps willing to go in, but we had the Ikhwan who were volunteers to go in. We were hit in 1999 by what was called the so-called Fidain action of lots and lots of Pakistani terrorists who came in. They were not suicide bombers, they were suicide fighters. They came in, made an entry into a camp, went berserk, firing all over, killing as many people, and dying, fighting till their death. That was their system. After having seen this all over Victor Force, in places like Birwa, and of course, Victor Force was controlling the whole valley at that time. We started from Bandipur and all over the valley. Around the 10th or 12th such incident happened on the 13th of January, I still remember, 2000, the turn of the millennium, when one sector RR got hit by a squad, by such a Fidain squad, which came bursting and went through the open gates of the headquarters at 6 o'clock in the evening, when the gates had been opened to bring food from one side of the camp to the other side. If anyone goes to Anantnag, he will know that one sector RR is divided on two sides of the road, the main highway. And two terrorists managed to get inside. And they rushed, and their whole system was they rushed and they went for a MES building which was double-storied, and they got into the house on top. And they took a family hostage. In the course of this whole operation that night, the DQ of the brigade, very brave man, Major Muthanna of Sikhelai, was also killed. One more Jawan died. That was the time when we had units of the RR coming in. It was becoming almost impossible to take them out. That is the time the people you talk about, Jandua, people like Tahir, were there with me at that night inside the camp. Liaquat was there, Tahir was there, all these people were there. And it was Tahir who finally actually carried out the operation. They are the ones who brought out Major Muthanna's body from inside the house. And they are the ones who went and laid the explosives around that building. Of course, 7RR along with them at that time. And the manner in which I saw this operation being conducted was absolutely meticulous. It was such an experience to have these brave hearts working with us right there, just not concerned about their safety at all. Yes, over to
you. The names that you take, Tahir, Liaquat, Kokapare in the north, that you are absolutely right, sir, since you've experienced this. I just want to talk about the concept. You started, you stole the words out of my mouth when I was going to start by saying we learned from our experiences in Sri Lanka. We realized that conventional armies are not meant to fight the way we are fighting terrorism, and to some extent also from Punjab, because both were winding down that time. And there was a terrorist organization called JKSLF, Jammu Kashmir Student Liberation Front. Now,
You
as a
mentioned it
word,
very often in the book. Yes.
yes, I mentioned it because it started with them. The students, being students, they were a slightly more educated lot, and they got disillusioned by Pakistan. A number of them, not all, a number of them got disillusioned by Pakistani machinations. They realized that Pakistan is actually using them to serve their own ends, and they got once they got disillusioned, many of them wanted to come overboard. And I think a lot of credit has to be given to all the stakeholders. Not the least is Mr. Rajesh Pilot. He was the only one time that we had a Minister of Internal Security. Uh, the intelligence agencies, the army, police, everyone put their heads together. We took these surrendered terrorists in our wings. Initially, it was JKSLF, but then several other terrorists also joined. Some of them joined police and BSA also, small segment. But then this Ikwan actually worked like General Hasnain just brought out in that particular incident. They actually worked from villages. They generated real-time intelligence, actionable intelligence. They led the operations. They not only knew the modus operandi of the terrorists, they actually knew the terrorists by name and face of the other organizations. And I think for 9 years, if not full 10 years, 9 years, they did a great job. 1993, Ikwan was raised. So you mentioned this incident of 2000, around 2000,
99.
and so somewhere there. And then in 2003, we decided to, by 2002 or 3, the state decided to wind down Ikwan after the next J&K elections had been held. And after the new government was formed, it was decided to wind up Ikwan, but not leave them high and dry. Uh, what had been decided that Ikwan, all those who were in Ikwan, would be given a chance to form this bolder experiment that I mentioned. We formed a territorial army battalion, home and earth, and all those who wanted to join were allowed to join this battalion. And this is a very hilarious chapter in this book, the raising of this battalion, because it's one thing to have renegades or rebels who want to help the army or security forces, but it is another thing to actually make soldiers out of them. They wouldn't like to cut their hair, they wouldn't like to stick to timing, they wouldn't like to come to PT parade
If you have a situation where you're controlling counter groups, you will
absolutely.
realize it is a very, very difficult job. Because you are driving along Anantnag or any place and suddenly come across people with AK-47 strung up and you think these are terrorists. But they are actually
Absolutely.
parts of your own force.
In fact,
That is where the challenge lies.
at sometime later they decided to they started wearing a black Pathan suit. Towards the end, they started doing that for the Ikwan. But the challenge, and I've given due credit to Colonel Sudhir Tiwari, who raised this battalion. And sometime it would happen early in the morning when you woke up, suddenly say 10 or 12 of these new soldiers had decamped. They would just desert, or they would go back to their old commanders. So there were a lot of challenges which have been brought out in the book, but eventually they were such a valuable asset, this territorial army battalion, home and earth, of I beg your pardon, of surrendered terrorists. In 2004 we started this battalion was started, and they have provided great service. The boys are attached to different battalions, RR battalions, all over the valley. They don't sort of.
I think in the same breath, we should explain to our audience that there were 8 such battalions of the Home and Hearth, which were raised across Jammu and Kashmir. The Jammu and Kashmir Light, I had 161 infantry battalion
Yes.
of the Jackalai, and I was asked to raise one full company. In fact, not one company. We raised two companies from Uri itself.
Yeah.
So large number of we had huge rallies, recruitment rallies, which were wonderfully. It was a great experiment. Lots of those people today continue. It added to a lot of pushali, as they call it in Kashmiri, a lot of pushali into the lives of lots and lots of people all over. And this concept really worked well. Although originally we thought that they would all stay in their villages on a permanent basis, no.
But no.
Most of them stayed in the units as soldiers, as good disciplined soldiers, and continued to come and go from time to time into the villages and come back to us. Networks were established by them. Now, this is where the understanding of the Indian Army's concept of hybrid war really comes. You see, we were always steeped in either conventional operations or pure counterinsurgency operations. These were the experiments over a period of time which were carried out, bold experiments. As I think the idea of TA Home and Earth actually came just around the time of General Patankar. And General Patankar is a member of our CASA group also. It is originally from his time. I'm not sure whether it was whose idea it was, but 2002 was the case.
I'll tell you whose idea it was. In fact, I also stumbled on this much later. Very frankly, this does not come out of the book. It was Brigadier SS Elawat of Jat Regiment. He was commander 3 Sector RR.
Yeah.
He is the one who actually pushed this idea. In fact, I have gone to the Ikhwan camp at Kulgam, where Nazir Wani's home is there. This I went after my retirement. He's the one who got those camps made so that they lived in a secure environment, because they were under threat from the other terrorists if they lived in the villages. So General Patankar, of course, must have obviously supported the idea as the corps commander, but it was his brainchild. In fact, all these 8 territorial home and earth battalions were eventually a fallout of this. Chaliya sir, we should move further if you want. Otherwise, we'll be only.
Yeah.
Let's talk about any other subject about Jackalai Regiment or
no, Satish. Satish, I would request you to put out 3 highlights of your book, which you felt closest, and you could, 3 or 4. I mean, I'm just giving you that.
I'll be very brief because I have given. Okay, let me start. The first. This is for the viewers actually. In January 1980, I joined the Jackalai Center as a second lieutenant. There was an India-Pakistan test match going on. Those days, the test match was the only cricket matches. And we were walking in the market. Having heard the commentary on the radio before starting, India was likely to win. Very few test matches ended in a win. Most were draws those days. And we heard the commentary in Lal Chowk in a shop, and we walked in and asked for the score, kya hua? The Kashmiri woman sitting there, she said this, hara diya na tumhare India ne. Now, in 1980, as a young, impressionable mind, we 2 second lieutenants are walking there. And when we hear this, so this undercurrent of this sentiment had been there all along. It is even in 1983, I was in Kupwara. My unit was deployed on the LOC. I was a captain. And even those days, Atta sir, you would remember, even those days when we used to come from Kupwara to Srinagar, I remember coming on a bullet. But we were not. There was no QRTs. There was nothing happening.
Yeah, it was open.
It was open. I used to drive on my bullet from there to my center in Srinagar. It used to take about 3 hours those days. But still, those days we were not allowed to drive through the shorter route, which is via Sopur. We had to come via Baramulla, which is slightly longer route. And you've been GOC in Baramulla, sir. Before being the corps commander and also the brigade commander.
Sopur was always the problem.
Absolutely. So Sopur and Anantnag have always been those kind of flashpoints, even then. So this sentiment, I want to tell everyone that we who served there have seen this undercurrents then. In the 1987 election, which was widely perceived to be rigged, and what happened thereafter is a open story, especially uh, Sayyid Salahuddin then going away. He was the one who was perhaps defeated, who in one of the rigged polls was defeated. So whatever, let's not get into the politics of it. But in 87, 88 started doing this overtly. We started having militancy supported by Pakistan, because they had by then mujahids from Afghanistan were free, Russia had left, and the mujahids were creating nuisance inside Pakistan, and they pushed these fighters towards our side. I'm sure, sir, Ata sir, आपका भी experience होगा. I have also had the same experience that when I was as commanding my battalion, we've killed Afghani terrorists during infiltration. We've killed Sudani terrorists during infiltration. So those days, these were the guys who were coming in. The militancy went up to such a level. From it shifted in mid-90s towards south of Pir Panjal also, but it went to, they used to roam in thousands. And in 2001 was the peak. I think the figures were 2100 or a little 2100 plus were terrorists killed in the year 2001. I was a commanding officer that time. So I am trying to portray the fact that how militancy was at such peak at those times. The number of terrorists that were roaming around in the whole of J&K, because by then it was in south of Pir Panjal also, was
Quite a bit.
Generation cannot imagine the number of encounters we used to have, encounter a week and things like that. So I think we've seen those ups and downs. And then eventually the militancy having shifted to the south. Thereafter, in 2003, we had a ceasefire. We then erected an LC fence.
Ceasefire with Pakistan. We had a ceasefire with Pakistan.
Yes, ceasefire with. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. I may have
given it's important to explain that the ceasefire with terrorists also happened in the year 2000.
That was a brief affair, sir. But in 2003, when we had this ceasefire with Pakistan, thereafter we actually realigned the fence. We had already started constructing the fence. I don't know about you, General HASNAIN, sir, but when General Vij started this anti-infiltration obstacle system, colloquially called the LC fence, to stop terrorism, I, having served there for a couple of 3 tenures, I was sort of skeptical of this. I didn't think it would be able to make much of a difference. But
the decision to make the fence continuous was taken in my ops room with General Vij, his visit there, and General Hari Prasad. Let me just outline to you. You bring out a very important milestone in the history of terrorism in Kashmir. This aspect of 2003, it needs to be told in a little detail, in the sense that there was a concept called the mathematics of terror, which meant that we could kill on an average 1,300 terrorists every year. The year you talk of 2001 was an exceptional year when we killed 2,100 and more. But our average was about 13 to 1,400 terrorists. And every year we had infiltration figures of 2,000 or more. So at the end of the year, the figure in mathematics was always in favor of Pakistan and always in favor of terrorists. It was decided that if our counter-infiltration posture could be effective, which was ineffective till then, because we didn't know where to concentrate, we had to make a continuous fence. And just like General Doa just says, to think of a continuous fence at the heights of Chinar or Rajput Tekri and places like that, I had a laugh actually the first time. I said, how can you make a fence here? And General Vij, to his credit, I hope General Vij hears this once again. I've told it to him many times on his face. General Vij gave a kick in the backside of everyone who doubted it, including me. And I'm telling you, I overnight got down to making this fence. My brigade, the Uri Brigade, constructed 89-90 kilometers of this fence. And over the most difficult terrain, I can tell you.
Sir, you and I were posted together as colonels in MS Branch, and General Vidge was the chief, and you had just from there moved as brigade commander. Where I ended by saying that I was one of the skeptics, as were many of us about the fence. I've written these words in the book. I was so happy. I'm so happy to be proved wrong, because when I went back as a brigade commander, I was again brigade commander in Punch. The fence, LC fence, has been a game changer.
Absolutely.
It has, though we have to keep resuscitating always, but if there has been a drop in the number of residual terrorists, that if there has been that kind of mathematics of infiltration, mathematics of terror, as you said, in that we've been able to make a very significant change there. So let's talk about, let's shift gears a bit and
Yeah,
talk
let's
about.
shift gears. Let me shift the gear.
Okay.
One thing which you have been involved in was the surgical strikes, and that's what I put out today, leading the surgical strikes. And that was the resultant of what happened in Uri. So just take us through the whole story, what the surgical strikes did, why you did it, how you did it, and then I'll get General Hasnain to talk about the surgical strikes as much. Yeah, all yours, Satish.
Uh, Essentially, everyone knows that on 18th of September 2016, we had 4 suicide terrorists come in at our camp in Uri, which is bang on the LOC, and there we lost 18 soldiers. General HASNAIN has been the brigade commander there in Uri, and has also been the GOC of the division under which Uri falls, the division headquarters in Baramulla. So he knows the terrain even better than I do. The brigade headquarters and this area where this camp took place are co-located. Now, we lost 18 soldiers. Now, that was a very big thing. But remember the context. 2016, few months before that, there was a Pathankot, there was attack at
Event,
the
yeah. Airport.
airbase
Airbase.
station. Yes, airbase at Pathankot. We had casualties there. There was this EDI building at Pampur on the outskirts of Srinagar, a 6-storied EDI building where 66 hostages were taken by 4 suicide terrorists. That building burning because of our operations and terrorists firing at it for 2 days in the media struck the national consciousness. So events like this, and I think it was enough was enough. But I will still give credit to one thing. I don't think this would have happened had not the defense minister reached there that very day. Late Mr. Manohar Parrikar reached there that very day, despite my protestations, and I frankly admit it. When the defense secretary rang me up, Mr. Mohan, and he rang me up and said, the defense minister is coming. The army chief was already there, the army commander was there, and we'd gone to Uri and taken stock of the situation and everything. That's as the military action should be. But when the defense minister, when he came there and he wanted to go to Uri, I said, sir, that's not recommended, because fires were still raging. Literally, fires were burning in a cookhouse. Sanitization operations were going on. We had to clear the areas around and all that. So he agreed on our recommendation that we would come to the Badami Bagh cantonment headquarters. We briefed him there. After the initial briefing, we were in my office. Only the defense minister, army chief, army commander, and I. And I think that's the time when he asked, what can our response be? And then one knew very well that how our response should be. So during the discussions that followed, we suggested, I actually remember saying this, that we will do something that has never been done before. Let us go across. We will hit the terrorist camps. We are prepared. And I will be very frank. I did not expect a go ahead to come that very day. I expected he would go discuss and we would get our orders and so on and so forth. But to his credit, he he just gave a go ahead. He had a couple of questions, one or which I have mentioned in the book. Rest, obviously, we cannot discuss
Yeah, you
the
can't
details.
do that. Yeah.
We can't discuss any of those details. But whatever we discussed over there, uh, but the fact is, he gave the go ahead there. And then, of his two questions, I'll just point out the relevant one. He said, but there should be no casualties. I said, sir, I agree with you. There should be no casualties to own troops. But this is war. कुछ भी हो सकता है. We will have to be prepared to accept a few casualties. And then there was the silence. And I really thought to myself, galti kar di. I shouldn't have said this, because now the politician in him won't allow. But to his credit, he just used one word, very popular in Bombay and in Marathi. He said, Barobar. And there we had a green signal. And in the next 10 days, preparations were made, briefings were done, and without getting into details of what happened, we did something that was never done before. We actually, because, and what I remember talking with the defense minister is that we always are getting more and more defensive. We are only instituting more defensive measures. We don't have terrorists to send across. They come inside. They, they come inside. Either they are killing our soldiers or they're killing our civilians, and they sometimes even mutilate the bodies and go back. We don't have terrorists to send across. So we must do something like this. And I really give full credit there to the leadership for taking the decision. And the last thing I will say, the suggestion was, sir, Pakistan always denies when we present them dossiers, when we say that we have the identifications, these terrorists have come from that side, they say, no, they are your own freedom fighters. They are not from Pakistan. We will take ownership. And that's what we did. We took ownership. The next day, DGMO came in his full uniform and announced to the world in a press conference saying that we did it. We did it because you did it. And we don't want to escalate it further. The onus of escalation is on you. Pretty much like what Iran has done now to Israel.
Yeah. So, fine. HASNAIN, sir, I would like you to... Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your thing.
What I think we have achieved by this, I will not talk about how many terrorists were killed and how many places were stuck, how many camps were stuck.
That's okay. That's part of
apart from, you kill a few terrorists will come up. More terrorists will be recruited. What we have done, for the first, we have drawn new red lines. We have, as a nation, done something that I think set the tone. 2.5 years later, we had another spectacular terror attack at Pulwama, and we did precision airstrikes at Jabba Top near Balakot. We have imposed that kind of caution on the Pakistan military, on the Pakistan army specifically. Today, they also have an apprehension that we will carry out some such operation. Next time, if it has to happen again, it may not be any of these two modus operandi. And I was very happy to learn, as CISC, as Chief of Integrated Defense Staff, when I moved after Corps Commander, I went to LOC to visit my battalions as Colonel of the regiment, 2 of them, and in J&K. I'm very happy to learn that. Then I learned that, okay, now Pakistan Army also lays ambushes, does patrolling. Now, this is something that Indian Army always used to do, because we used to be trying to ward against infiltration attempts from their side. So that kind of caution has been imposed on the country and on the Pakistan Army. Thank you.
Sir, thanks. General HASNAIN, sir, I would like you to, put out as to what did these surgical strikes achieve besides what Satish said, and did they build a base for further action?
Yeah, 2 things, Shankar, 2 things which I will comment upon. which I think will remain relevant. One is a reinforcement, taking ownership. Now, I won't go into the comments on it because this subject is far too classified to speak about. But the fact that the government of India took ownership of what it did sent a clear-cut message, something which had never happened in the past, right? It's important that when it's important for the military of any nation and the political authority to be in sync with each other. You can't leave an environment just to the army, to the military, and say, carry on with counterinsurgency, bring the level of insurgencies to so-and-so, or bring it to a strength of terrorists less than 1,000 or something, without taking ownership of the situation yourself. I think the current government, what they achieved was, in this context, was this particular fact. If we had suffered casualties while carrying out surgical strikes, the ownership would still have been on them. The onus would have been on the government of India. Thankfully, it did not happen. Right? This is an important fact aspect to keep in mind. It gave the confidence to the government of India and it gave confidence to the Indian army, both in each other, mutual trust in each other. That's number one. The second thing I think which is very important, which was alluded to by General Dua, but I'll put it in slightly different words. There existed some kind of a assumption in the minds of the Pakistani leadership that being a nuclear power, they somehow forget that this side also there are nuclear weapons in India.
Yeah.
They seem to want to imagine they are the only ones who have got nuclear weapons. Right? They seem to think that they are the only ones who got nuclear weapons. Every time, in fact, even in track 2, I've come across this. They always talk about hamare nuclear hathiyar. Bhai, hamare paas bhi to nuclear hathiyar hai. They never talk about that. So they always thought that any aspect reaction from our side will always take into consideration the possibility of a nuclear response. So that they always felt that that aspect was always a deterrence for us. What the surgical strikes did and what subsequently with the Balakot strike, and hopefully sometime in the future it may happen with other things also, is to break that syndrome completely. To tell them that the window below the nuclear umbrella, there is a window which exists, which can be exploited by India in the time and place of its own choosing. This was a doctrinal aspect which went home very clearly to the Pakistanis. I know it because I reinforced this in at least 10 meetings of the track 2 directly to the Pakistani generals. So these are two aspects I thought I must comment on.
No, there is yet another aspect of the surgical strikes, sir. You see, the surgical strikes were the first official cross-border strikes carried out with the sanction of the government of India, explicit sanction of the government of India. And we did it. Until then, I dare say that even the government was hesitant to do this. Now, once we did this, the red line shifted, the imaginary red line shifted. And we transgressed into POK. But come the next event, Pulwama, we did this operation on Jabba Top, which actually is in Pakistan. You cross the IB.
Yes.
And you cross the IB using Air Force, which is probably a higher level of escalation.
Absolutely.
And I think I don't think any government could have taken the decision without the first step of the surgical strikes which was executed. And I'll explain it a little more the way I look at it. You see, if you remember, just after the surgical strikes, there were a lot of criticism of the surgical strikes that they did achieve nothing. What is it? You went 500 yards in, you went 1,000 yards in. There was a debate. Did you do anything? All that nonsense. The acid test of the success of the surgical strikes lies in the fact that the government was convinced that what was achieved was correct. And then they could do the next step. This is something which many of us have lost sight of. Why?
You may like to remember one thing, General Shankar.
Yeah.
You may like to remember one thing, and I think this needs to be also added to our institutional memory that preceding the surgical strikes also was an event in the Northeast. If you remember, 4th of June, when
Manipur.
6
Manipur.
Dogra was hit
Across.
in Manipur, and
Yeah.
we went
Yes.
across. General Bipin Rawat was the
Across.
commander.
Yeah. Bipin Rawat, yes.
Yes. Bikram Rawat was the corps commander. Or not Bikram, I'm sorry. Bipin Rawat was the corps
Bipin
commander
Rawat.
at that time. And I still remember meeting the Raksha Mantri, Mr. Manoj Parikar, just after that. And he himself related the entire thing and how the decisions were taken at that particular time in a dinner in his house, which I was very fortunate to attend along with General Malik. And I think that is what led to the emboldenment of that decision. You see, Mr. Manoj Parikar also came from CV Street, and he walked into the Raksha Mantri. He was an astute and very, very bold Raksha Mantri. His ways of dealing with everyone was something very different to what we had experienced with Raksha Mantris in the past. So it was a pleasant surprise, and therefore the kind of decisions which he gave General Dua were probably expected at that time. And he was very frank and transparent.
I would still say, at the expense of repetition, before we move away from this topic, that I half expected him to say that, okay, I will discuss with the Prime Minister, or we will discuss and you will get your orders. And then all three of us know, then it wouldn't have happened. That the decision was given there, the entire army chief, Northern Army, and I was there, and it was a green on go. There was nothing else. Only coordination was to be done.
Okay. So we'll Now let's come to the present. See, a lot of things have gone in Kashmir. A lot of things have changed. Article 370. If you start the discussion, we could continue the whole night. I'm not getting there. Right now, we are on the cusp of a new assembly, and elections are just finished. How do you see this continuum going ahead? I'll first ask Satish, based on your experience and what you've written in the book, because your book has really gives us no clue of whether you foresaw this day also, when Article 370 would have been scrapped and we had elections and some kind of peace and paryatan going around there and all that. So what is your visualization of Kashmir as we go ahead in these conditions? And then we'll ask General HASNAIN for his views.
So in my book, the epilogue
I know
about Article 370 being diluted, and then the kind of development activities that have taken place, because now it is being governed by the center, having become a union territory, and it has brought out the empirical data, the other activities, etc. Brought out what has happened. For the first time, we have a 3-tier panchayat in place, so the grassroots empowerment, the political process was on, which is a very good thing. We are seeing peace and quiet, whether it is on the streets. There's no stone pelting. There are very few encounters with terrorists. In Kashmir, the schools are running, the bands are not there. So I will not go into those details that everyone else goes. We should come now to the fact that there has finally, the stage has been set. Like we discussed 1996 at length, that was a turning point. The elections, despite the state being in the grip of such heavy militancy those days, we were emboldened enough. And Mr. Dullat says in his book that 1996 elections were a turning point. Similarly, these elections that have just finished, the Lok Sabha elections a couple of months ago, and more than that, is the J&K elections that have just finished day before yesterday. I think while the results are still to come, they're another 5 days, but we have given expression to the political aspirations of the people. People have spoken. As I referred to in between, somewhere alluded to that in between, in my view, we might not get a decisive mandate. No party might get a decisive mandate. We might have a fractured mandate, and there will come the importance of some wild cards. We have, and that's the beauty of democracy. We have, uh, I
Engineer
think,
Rashid type.
Engineer Rashid has already won in Lok Sabha election.
No, no, his type. I said
Separatist and
his ilk.
strong separatist leaning. We have 30, or I don't remember the exact figure, candidates backed by Jamaat Islami. We will have, so the mandate will throw up
32
such
and 10.
elements also. Sorry, sir.
32 by
Yeah.
Engineer Rashid and 10 of the Jamaat.
So 10 of them.
What
So, all that put together, the total number is 30 plus. So, if those are the candidates who are going to be in fray, let's see how many of them win. But I would say, still, even if a significant number of these candidates win, I would still feel, if you fall back to the examples of, let's say, Mizoram, we had Lal Denga, who was leading the uprising. Lal Denga became the chief minister, and Laltan Hawla stepped down for the sake of peace. So we've had such experiments are not only in India. I think it's happened in Mozambique, it's happened in Africa, it's happened in 3 or 4 other countries. There have been such instances where those who were against the state have actually formed the governments. So one cannot crystal gaze till we get the election result. But I am very hopeful that in the last 5 years, the younger generation at least has now seen, for 5 years or more, they have seen no stone pelting. Otherwise, the times that General Hasnain and I have served there, we have always seen stone pelting. The Hurriyat calendar, there is buns, no one in the market, never has the tricolor flown there. Now there is a Pizza Hut and a KFC, and there are the multiplexes and malls. When this younger generation starts, and so many other things, when the younger generation has tasted this normalcy of life, the number of tourists that are coming in, so many other things, I am hopeful that the slide back into that kind of terrorist era may not be there. And that is my fervent hope and desire. Over to you, sir.
Yeah.
General Hasnain.
So,
Thank you. I mean, that I can't differ with that in any way, but I'll just reinforce it a little bit. I would say, irrespective of what the results are on the 8th of October, the fact that these elections have been held without any violence. I've experienced all the elections in Kashmir. And I can tell you, I can particularly talk about the 99 and 2002 elections, perhaps to an extent, or more 99 elections, 2 of them. Avantipur, I still remember, at one time, I was handling 14 to 15 contacts, operations going on in South Kashmir at one time. Elections were being held with these type of contacts, grenade attacks, rocket fire all over the place, right? Who would come for the elections? Naturally, if no one wants to come and die at the polling booth, putting his stamp on a ballot paper, so there used to be hardly any turnout. Today, when I was looking at it yesterday and participating in a TV program with Doordarshan yesterday, I found the density of uniformed presence is minimal. It is like it is in UP or Uttarakhand or any other place. So normalcy has, to that extent, normalcy has come, no doubt about it. It's a question of not converting this piece into something permanent. We have seen that a little bit of, lack of focus can sometimes lead to slippages, like has happened in south of Pir Panjal. We can't afford to allow this to happen to the north of Pir Panjal. And I continue to say that whatever has happened in the Jammu region is only a sideshow still, right? It's a maneuver to hit the center of gravity, which is primarily the valley. That is where the Daromadar, as you say, the center of gravity lies for Pakistan, right? So they are not going to relent. They are going to continue. The greatest thing of what our approach, the Indian system's approach, is, first of all, it's become an all-of-government approach. Earlier, if you remember, though I would remember, most of the times, it was primarily the armies, security forces, It was at our behest only, and whatever turnout used to take place used to happen at that. Today, people are coming out voluntarily. People today, stark difference again, 3 to 4 flights landed at the Srinagar airport in those days. Today, 93 flights are landing every day. 93 flights are landing at the Srinagar airport in a day, taking off and landing in a day out there. That's the kind of tourist footprint which is taking place, right? The economy, 11% growth, 12% growth for a state which has seen terror for all these years. So obviously, it is going to take a generation or 2 generations. 1989, the young generation of 1989, which grew up, saw only the gun, only the jackboot of our soldiers, all of us in uniform, the combat dress next to their houses. That is what they grew up with. And they had an antipathy against us, animosity against us. That's not going to be there in the future. This is what we have to ensure. There will be efforts from the other side. No, they are not going to give up, I can assure you. They're not going to give up. So the elections are a means of bringing in greater normalcy. They are probably the finest ways of bringing in greater normalcy. We only hope that the leadership which comes about there can be trusted, can deliver, ensure that there's the least of corruption. I think the current Lieutenant Governor has done a very, very good job. And I hope that kind of a administration continues to function. A lot will depend, of course, what is the relationship of the government which comes in there, the political dispensation of that government with the government of India in Delhi. That relationship, a lot will depend on it as far as the future of Jammu and Kashmir is concerned.
Thank you, sir. I think we've had. Yeah, please go ahead.
No, I know you're going to wind up in lighter way.
No, I'm not. I'm going to take a few questions.
Yeah, I know.
If
Before
you,
you take
if you,
questions, I want
yeah,
to say something in lighter vein on what General Hasnain said. We all know, General Hasnain, and all of us who serve, that Indian Army is deployed in big measure because we are there on the LOC for both, ever since independence. We are there now in the hinterland, in the grid, whether it's Rashtriya Rifle, Army. And so there's a very heavy deployment of Army across the J&K. And by virtue of our deployment there, we actually pump in a lot of money into the local economy. We do, whether it's our SNS funds, porters, ponies, even by the way of every man spending some money on his own daily needs. Everything is going to that. So everything is. Today, I think no one has carried out the study. And that's why I said in lighter vein. I think now the tourist has displaced the Indian Army as the biggest spender there because
that's the best thing which could happen.
That's the best thing. That's the best thing.
Yeah.
There was a study of this carried out in the year 2010.
Oh, right. Then I stand corrected.
About 850 crores was the estimate at that time. What the Indian Army was contributing to the annual budget of the Jammu and Kashmir government at that time, right?
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
I'm talking of tourists. I'm talking. No one must have.
Yeah. So the tourists are spending much more.
Yes.
So but the army was spending approximately 850 crores in Jammu and Kashmir, which is a sizable amount of money compared to the economy of Jammu and Kashmir at that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. The first question goes to Dua. Then Dua, sir, why hasn't Bharat conducted any further surgical strikes since 2019, even though a serious wave of terrorism continued in Jammu at least in 2023 and 24, if not earlier?
So my response to that, and I've been asked this question several times earlier also in different fora, is that you cannot, while General Hasnain spoke about having found a space below the nuclear threshold, you cannot at the drop of the hat think that you are going to go and hit across. When should you do that? I remember being on a TV debate when 9 pilgrims were killed in Riyasi. a few months ago, and someone said, why should we not be doing a surgical strike now? Nine people have been killed. And my response was, how many is enough? Is 9 enough? Should it be 40 like Pulwama or 18 like Uri? If that is not the figure, then where is it 12? Is it the number game? I don't think so. You have to have, there are several factors that have to be taken into consideration when we think that we will be launching a response like the two operations that we are speaking about. So I think we cannot make it a frivolous thing that every time something happens, we are going to launch a strike across into Pakistan. I will leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay. The next question to General HASNAIN. Sir, are there any additional measures our army can take to further prevent the Kashmiri youth from being drawn into extremism?
I think we have actually, this subject has not been discussed today so much out here at the moment, but I must draw attention to the fact it is also alluded to in the book. You see, when I started my intervention right in the beginning, the first part of this discussion, I spoke about the balance that the Indian Army has followed in its concept of operations and its doctrine that it has followed, unlike many armies around the world. For us, this balance has been very important. How much of violence to use and how much of approach, outreach to use. In 1997, we adopted what is called Operation Sadbhavna. Very few armies in the world adopt a thing like this. The British Army had done it in Malaya. The British Army did this in Northern Ireland to a great extent. In Northern Ireland in 1997, after signing the Good Friday Agreement, the British Army took one step back and said, we will hold the periphery and we will conduct non-military operations here while the government can continue its development activities, political and development activities. That was a game changer in Northern Ireland, completely. This is something similar which has happened here. In 1997, we started with Operation Sadbhavna. That is the same year in which the Supreme Court of India took cognizance of AFPA, Armed Forces Special Powers Act, 1990, and gave the Indian Army a set of do's and don'ts as guidelines. Not many people in India are aware of this. Corps commanders are aware of it, absolutely. Right? We are duty bound. For example, if we are sending out an operation, any operation of the Rashtra Rifles taking place outside the 20-kilometer limit of near the line of control, we have to include elements of the civil police with us. We cannot conduct operations without the civil police. It will be illegal. That's the Supreme Court's guideline. Now, this is what is called the humanization of conflict. We did it. I thought the Indian Army did it marvelously. And as a result, what happened? The youth, very, very consciously, we started nurturing the youth over a period of time. I'm not saying we have succeeded completely, but a very large segment of the youth has come overboard. Today, you have to just go and see the fantastic practice of what is called the Super 20, the Super 30, the Super 50, the competitive examinations that the Indian Army sponsors. Young Dua will probably tell you more. In his time, it was being conducted there. Competitive examinations, and from where we take out Kashmiri youth to make sure that they have better futures in their lives. You see, the Kashmiri youth are very, very talented. Particularly the female child, the kind of sportswomen that Kashmir produces. Almost all the contact games that young girls play internationally teams are almost always from Jammu and Kashmir. So these are kind of empowerment which the Indian Army has done over a period of time through its Sadbhavna programs and many things, many other aspects. What many people will know, 43 Gurul schools are run by the Indian Army in Jammu and Kashmir. A lot of people will say, is this the job of the Indian Army to run education schools? This is hybrid war. And my response to you will be, this is hybrid war. We are responsible for many things non-military there in the environment to nurture the youth.
I can, if I can, I may add one sentence to this. I have brought this out in the book. So please buy the book and read it. Uh, the There have been two experiments which for de-radicalization. For such the question that is being asked. One was in Maharashtra. The ATS did that, and one was in Kerala. And I will not get into details over here now how it was done. That thing has been brought out in the book, and we'll have to adapt it to different circumstances, but we need to learn lessons from other context also.
Thanks. Yeah, the next question is to General Hasnain again. On a lighter note, if I was to put Fort Gadwal as my first choice after going to academy, will that make me eligible for a lunch dinner invite at your place?
365 days in the year, you can have lunch and dinner if you are opting for Fort.
Well said.
Okay. The last question. Though you said it, I think Satish, you take it on and we'll finish it off here. So please elucidate how the concept of Ikhwans came to be and how useful they were, and how did we turn them against jihad, or why they become turncoats. Please talk about Kuka Pare. Look, you've spoken about it. We've spoken
Yeah.
about it for a long time, but still the question lingers.
Yeah.
Last 2
Uh,
minutes to you.
maybe he had put the question before we explained the concept. I think we both discussed the Ikhwan concept. So, but to answer your question broadly, like I said, we learned from the experiment that we had in Sri Lanka. General HASNAIN brought out the EPRLF experiment. We learned from Punjab, and we decided that we needed something more. Normal conventional kind of operations will not do. And the surrender terrorists were coming up, and then the whole state put together. This was a lot of credit also goes to Mr. Rajesh Pilot and all the agents, intelligence agencies, armies put together. We decided to make this force contra rebels who helped us in operations. And like I said, they actually brought about a lot of General HASNAIN actually brought out a couple of operations where Rashtriya Rifles did not go, Army did not go. These guys conducted the very daring operation. So they conducted operations by themselves. A few of them, like we brought out, but they actually helped our Army and Rashtriya Rifles conduct the operations in a significant manner. Why did they become turncoats? I did mention about that. That is, they were disillusioned. Some of them who were disillusioned by Pakistan, they realized that they must do something else. Talk about Kuka Pare. Kuka Pare was the leader of Ikhwan in the north. Actually, he was the leader of the Ikhwan in the north side, the north of the valley. And in the south, it was Liaquat Ali. Kuka Pare is known more. I mean, everyone talks about Kuka Pare for two reasons. Firstly, in 1996 elections, he got elected. So he actually became a leader. Then his attention, obviously had to move away from Ikhwan, the activities of Ikhwan. And secondly, because he got shot, he came more into prominence. I've had detailed talks with Liaquat Ali, and so much about Kuka Pare, and that after his, after he was shot, and thereafter slowly Ikhwan experiment was wound up, and this Territorial Army Battalion, 162 Territorial Army Battalion, Home and Earth was raised.
May I
Yeah.
add one small
Thanks a
thing
lot.
to it?
Yeah, please,
Shankar?
sir.
I would like to leave on record that Liaquat Ali's achievements as a military leader were very marked.
Absolutely.
Right? He worked with me a lot, both with the Colonel GS of Victor Force and subsequently later, even as the Corps Commander. At that time, Ikhwan was not there, but he was still there. And I can tell you his advice. I used to tell a lot of people, go and meet Liaquat. Because Liaquat is, you see, in Kashmir, unless you know institutionally the history of that place, in terms of the incidents which have happened over a period of time, you do not get the idea correct. It's, if someone thinks he can just parachute into Kashmir and understand it from day one, this is how operations are conducted, you got to think again. You've had 40 years of all this happening. Things have been dynamic out here. One person who's got the institutional memory of this is Liaquat Ali.
Yes. And I would like to
Right.
inform the viewers. I would just like to inform the viewers that Liaquat Ali was Ikhwan. He was Ikhwan leader in the south, like I brought out. But he chose not to join the territorial army battalion, like Sheikh Tahir did. Tahir is another leader who did, or Romeo. I mean, we'll not get into more. Thank you.
Right. I think we've had a terrific discussion on General Satish Dua's book. That book is available here. This is the link, uh, Amazon link. I would suggest those of you who want to live through those times, and you need to live through those times, or at least understand those times, to understand what's happening today and what's going to happen tomorrow, right? It's just not understanding the history of India and Pakistan and LOC, how it came up, and how Maharaja Hari Singh signed that Treaty of Ascension. There are a lot of things which have happened in Kashmir. I mean, let me put it, 85, I still remember Boris Becker winning the first Wimbledon, of his 3 Wimbledons in a row. When I was sitting in Srinagar, in my unit, it was there at the outskirts of Srinagar. So things changed, and a lot of history has flown there. We need to know that, to have an empathy with the people out there, because ultimately those people are someone who are part of us, and we need them. With this, I'd like to thank General Hasnain especially. Sir, you made it, you took your time off to be as part of General Satish Dua's book
Always
and
a
be
pleasure
on Ghana Shot.
for
And
Kashmir and for
and we are discussing this book in Kashmir because I think Kashmir itself is at another turning point of its lifetime. And that we're discussing as Israel is founding Beirut and other places. And as China is getting more entangled in South China Sea and things like that, where more seductive and optical things are happening all over the world, we are discussing the past, which is very important. And I think I thought it was more important than discussing all this, so that those of you of the future generation understand this. Buy this book, worth it. And thanks a lot to both of you, and thanks a lot to all the questions. I'm sorry I couldn't take all those questions, because if I let these two gentlemen, they'll keep us the whole night here in
And
Kashmir.
may I may I
Yeah,
also special
please. Yeah,
thanks to General Hasnain sir for being here and giving your insights. Uh, you have more experience than I do, and it's always a pleasure to discuss things with you. And thank you, General Shankar sir, for organizing this, holding this talk.
thank you once again
thanks.
to
Thanks a
everyone.
lot, sir.
Thank you. Good night and
Thank
all
Good
the
you.
best.
evening and Jai
Yeah.
Hind to everyone.